minute if there's any questions or any reflections that anybody wants to say anything at this moment. Or maybe even your experience with, opening up to this whole shift of, it's like shifting your whole foundation. Yes, Leah.
I think I had mentioned this. It came up when we did our interview, and I was just talking about growing up in a very fundamentalist Christian tradition and the Christian Judaic tradition. And I just wanted to say thank you, because since our conversation, and it was happening a little bit before, but you kind of just like stamped it in me, like, all right, girl, let's go. And since then, I've been doing a lot of research, and the suppression of the feminine, even in the Christian tradition, like not even having to go anywhere else besides the Christian and early Judaic, the suppression of the feminine, it's in the recorded history. You can see it. Like, it's very clear, the suppression of the Queen of Heaven. It's very clear what the elites were trying to get the people to stop doing. And so I just wanted to say thank you, because it's helping shed away this really huge fear to even decenter men from spirituality and decenter men from the
yeah, speaking my language. Yeah. And we've done it. I've done it for years, like, and it's so ingrained, we don't even know.
It is. And I love the confirmation of in our DNA is the somatic fear that in doing so, we can put ourselves at risk, but in our entire family unit at risk by leaning into these gifts. And I think about how many gifts I suppressed on my own, knowing that they would not be received well, and how many people around me, men in the church, my own male family members, were like, Leah, that looks like witchcraft. And it was just me playing. It was me being interested in plants. It was me. I remember I intuitively, on my own volition, never seen this before, never had anybody tell me to do this. At 10 years old, I built my own altar for my grandmother. And it was like, it got snuffed out over and over and over and over again. And it's just, I just wanted to thank you. As coming into alignment, there is still a lot of fear.
Of course.
Even referring to God in feminine terms, but to deny the divine feminine is it's the most unintelligible way to go about spiritual. It makes no sense. There's nothing in our reality that would even suggest an all masculine source in any capacity. So, but it is still a lot of fear, a lot of deep hell, fire and brimstone fear. And so this is what it's been like for me just these past couple months.
Thank you for that. A couple of things I want to say around that. So I know I didn't go into my story yesterday, and I'm not going to go into today, but the point is, like, I've kind of have gone into a lot. I mean, I was raised with a lot of spirituality and esoteric practices, and from my mother. And back then, I was like 8 years old, and we used to go in New York City and go and meditate, with a guru that was male. And, so I was exposed to that. I mean, it was like big room of, just people meditating for hours, transcendental meditation. But I was and so that led me, I was very exposed to spirituality very early on. And there was this aspect of me that was very into spirituality. And then I went through like the Vedic and the gurus. And actually I was more with Shiv Sananda, which is a woman. And but I also, went into, later on, I went into, of course, the Chinese medicine and the Taoist and, all of that, and the Qigong. And I told you that experience with the Qigong. And like, at times I was like, like there was no permission to like even explore that any further. Because the lineage wasn't what I needed. Right. And my point is that even though I was exploring and really dove deep into all of these spiritual different lineages to, because I was seeking something and I couldn't find it anywhere. But at the same time, these were all really important because they're all woven into the work I do today, because I feel like the work that of the feminine has come through. It's like it's like primordial essence that then, as it was shut down, that essence still came through. It came through like the systems of the chakras and the energy, and like all of that is the feminine. If you go deep enough, you'll find that feminine essence, right, within all those other systems. But my point is that when I got to that point that you're speaking about, right, that point where you're like, that's it, there's something else. And all of this fear, because I knew, and this happened to me in around 2000, it was between 2006 and 2010, right? And it was a crisis on all levels, physical crisis, spiritual crisis. And I was surprised because of the fear that I could feel that wasn't my lived experience, but it was all in my like lineage of the Catholic, because then my mother's family was all Catholic. I mean, probably all of my lineages, but Catholic, Christian. No, that's not true. But my mother's, the way that I was raised, like they all went to church, but my mom was like the one that did it, right? But I was surprised at how I couldn't even like think about the feminine, the divine feminine, even though I had been reading and like I had been really immersed. My mother, had all of these books of the feminine. And yet when I like took it seriously, when I was like, that's it, all of this fear and terror, like I'm going to be burned in hell, like all these words would come through. And I'm like, I don't even like relate to this, but it was all in my DNA. Like it was all right here. It was all in my field. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying. And, and it was beautiful at the same time, because this was like the shift where the feminine was like, started to really come through, where I just like, knew I had to let go of everything I knew. Right. And then just like follow this voice, right, of the feminine. And it was terrifying. And yet it was like very gentle and nurturing, and little by little by little by little, it's like you transform. That's why I was talking yesterday about the fear, and that we have to create the safety, and then we can dissolve more of those patterns. And then we create more safety, and then we dissolve. We can't go all in, because we just can't handle it. I mean, some people, might, I don't know. My body went through such a transformation that all of like, I literally was physically, like it felt like I was dying, and all of my systems were like off. Like my blood pressure was off. My heart had like a couple of extra heartbeats, and it was like horrific. To just physically, it was affecting me physically. And I went through that. I mean, that's the dark night of the soul. For me, it was, it was big. But I also wanted like this big, like I was ready, and I was ready to go all in and like, give it everything. And then, it's like when I talk about that container, it's like at the end of all of that, like at the, at the core is like, it's the love. Like we can't fall into anything else, but we have to be willing to go through it and face those fears. And it's best if we do it with support, which I didn't really have. That's the problem. I didn't have someone to tell me, yes, I know what you're going through, and you're going to be okay. Like I would go to the masculine, teachers that I knew, the spiritual teachers, and they would be like, I don't know, maybe it's something from your lineage, maybe it's something, with dark spirits. I'm like, okay. Like they were clueless. And I'm like, yeah. And so this whole thing about witchy, it's like, oh, that looks too witchy, or that, yeah, that's like, that was the imprint that got overlaid over women's power. Right. And then this whole thing about the witches, and then the witches are now connected in our psyche, are demonized, right? So it's all like, if anything about the witch is connected not to our spiritual power, which that's being revived, that word is being revived now, but it's connected to Satan, the devil, and it's interesting to see in these communities how that, not just the Christian community, but I mean, I'm saying like some of these other spiritual communities, which I'm not even going to mention names, that's still a thing. Like if you speak your mind and you're not speaking from, what you're supposed to be saying, oh, well, that's from the devil, or that's from Satan, or that's from, Shaitan. And you're like, what? Like, yeah. So it's so there and so subtle that it was pretty sickening. And when I started to see that, I was like, oh, not in the obvious Christian Catholic, that's very obvious. And there's a lot, and it's not all like that, but a lot of it, unfortunately, you know. Um, yeah. So I'm going to end with that. Okay. Lots to say. Why don't you say it? Because it's hard for me to read that. Aradia, Elsa, everybody wants to chime in.
Oh, no,
That
no.
was
You
the
know
woman.
what?
Yes. Go ahead.
I was just asking for, just a screenshot of Anne Baring's page from that. I think that's the
Oh,
Great
I don't have,
Cosmic Mother,
I
or
that was
whatever,
on my
however you send
phone.
it. Yeah, yeah, however you can send it, if you can. I would
That
love
was
to
on my
receive that.
phone, but I can tell you
Okay.
the page. Do you have her book?
Yeah, that's why I was wondering. I
It's
think that's from the
it's page
beginning, from the forward.
AB 68. Yeah, it's from the
Okay.
forward.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because I read it before, but I wasn't sure where. That's why I was asking. Okay, great, thank you. That's what I
Yeah.
was asking. And just
Oh,
very quick, because I
Elsa
don't want
left.
to
Okay.
take up too much of the time here, but everything that you just said, I mean, of course it hits home. I mean, as a
Yeah.
feminist, pre-patriarchal teacher of the feminine divine, I mean, this is what I do, right? But I know exactly why. It's not just like, oh, it's such a shame. It's like, this is such an opportunity for us to, like, yeah, look at what's happened to the feminine. Yes, it's shameful, it's deplorable, but this is our chance to become empowered by that. So
Right.
by us receiving this information and
Yeah.
learning what our history, let's
Yeah.
say, for, I don't want to say
Hmm.
history,
No,
that's what it's all
history. Yeah.
about. It
Yeah.
really does
Exactly.
empower us. So it's an opportunity like we've never had before, and I'm so
Exactly.
happy that we're embracing this all together. That's
Yeah.
all I wanted to say.
Yeah. And we spend some time, we have to spend some time grieving, grieving the pain if it's new to you, because you realize like, wow, like all of us, I've been blaming myself all these years, and that's just part of the conditioning. I've been feeling worthless, and that's just the internalized, conditioning that creeps up at any minute. At any minute we go to do something new, and it's like, oh, I don't know, you might get judged, and and are you doing, good enough, and blah blah blah. It's like all of that, and it's just the energy that's been internalized, and we have to like realize that that's not our truth. And yet we experience that. So there's this whole process of grieving the pain that we've suffered ourselves and our lineage and women, and how we're still suffering, and how the whole world is, suffering because of this lack of love, really. I mean, in simple words, it's just love. Like we're not anchored in the love. We're anchored in competition. We're anchored in, and then that leads to war, and that leads to like me versus you. We're anchored in that, really distorted, masculine, proving you're better, proving, it's like proving your worth. And the truth is that our worth is inherent. Our worth is not measured by what we do, how many, books we can, sell, or the following on our social media, none of that. Right. Yet, I'm sure for all of us here, we get caught in that. It still comes up. You're right. It's like, and so it's like, that's the constant work of deprogramming ourselves and then connecting to our power, connecting to the sacred power, connecting to these 7 dimensions, and all of that has to offer. So yeah, that's the process. Oh, what I was going to say with Aradia, it was like, yes, and we can, as we're grieving, as we're like feeling the pain of not having that love, of not having, having been severed from the Great Mother, it's easy to also get stuck there. And so what Aradia was saying, is really the other side of that. It's like, okay, all right, I didn't have this, and it's important to grieve it and to feel those feelings. We don't want to bypass them, but then it's like, what am I being asked to do? Because I'm aware of this. Not everybody's aware, right? So there's a saying that if you're aware of what needs to happen, or if you're aware of what is lacking, then it is up to you to create it in the world, right? So I love that saying, because we can be like stuck in this like victimization of like, oh, it should have been this way, and all this pain and all this suffering around what we didn't have. You can really stay stuck there for years. I know I have. And it's slippery because it's important to grieve that, right? It's important to really feel those feelings. And then it's important to also ask the question, okay, what's being asked of me? If we're in service to the Great Mother, or to the divine, or to the love, like what is it? Because I'm aware of this dichotomy, and okay, so what role am I playing in this? And most likely it'll be a role to actually, bring through your truth around it, right? Like what you feel is true. And you're going to have to undo the, all the conditioning that comes up when you start to do that. Like Leo was saying, all that fear, all those that, for years. Yeah. So anyway. Okay, great. Anybody else? And I know we're out of time. I'm going to read something, and then I'm going to, I think we're going to let everybody go because we just keep going on and on. But I'm going to read the medicine woman that I wanted to read earlier. Any other questions? Reflections?
I just had a quick reflection. I've been in
Yeah.
a lot of like trauma-based classes and spaces before, and I really appreciate the perspective of this focusing on like the safety first,
Yeah.
because I feel like in a lot of trauma containers, even ones that have said that they're trauma informed and
Yep.
spiritual, it's like they go through all the like sources of trauma and shame and pain and like all the really heavy stuff without creating that safety first. And then you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so heavy and I don't have any tools to go through it. So I just really appreciate like setting that foundation.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest realizations of, being in a spiritual path that was, that they didn't talk about that because it's, in many ways it's male focused, right? And so male focused, they haven't been like erased like we have, right? Or debased, as we would say. They haven't, like, they don't have a self that in many ways, for women, it's very different than for the men, because women in culture in the last 5,000 years, like in many ways, because the feminine was demonized, it's like we've had to shut that down. So we've shut down a huge way that we operate, that we operate through sensing, through feeling, through connection, through relation to other, through our ability to, our intuition and the wisdom that is like so readily wired into our psyche and our body. So we shut that down, right? And so we've had to kind of like adapt to, the masculine traits of, doing and, accomplishment and blah, blah, blah. So, but when we start to realize that that's not like, okay, wait a minute, that's not really like in, in alignment, and there's this whole other side missing. And when we do like all of these other practices, which are to like, okay, transform, like let go of all of this conditioning, right? It's not like, it's hard to explain, but these practices that I was exposed to and that are very, very common in most of the spiritual paths that are created by men. And then what I'm saying is even the Vedic path, even the Sufi path, depending on, which sect you're working with, it's all about transformational practices. It's kind of like what you were just saying about the trauma. It's like, it's practices to dissolve, right? But it's almost like, what are we dissolving into as women? Because we don't have that foundation of who we are. We've shut that down. So as women, it's not just about dissolving. It's almost like, it's scary because for men, it's a little bit different because their egos, they've come into this distorted power as a like a unity, right? Like as all men, right? But they've come into this distorted power. And so, yes, it's all about dissolving the ego. They have to dissolve that because it's this false sense of power and power over. But that's not the case for women. For women, it's more like we need to actually connect with our foundation of who we are. It's like we need to actually build up a sense of self. We don't even have a sense of self, really. Right? Because psychologically, we've adopted these other traits. And yeah, everybody has feminine and masculine, but it's almost like this is taboo. And when we start tapping into this, it's like all this like fear and horror and like, oh my God, like this isn't safe. So it's very different, the practices. I'm not saying that we don't all need to dissolve ego. Yes, we all need to dissolve ego, and that's a given. But for women, we need to create the safety. We need to be able to build ourselves up. And the other problem that arises in trauma and psychology is that what is it that gives us the safety? The safety comes from an understanding, a subscription to our divine self, to something greater than ourselves, right? And so now you're starting to kind of tread those edges of psychology, and science. We're like, oh, wait a minute. Now we have to lean into, this spiritual power, right? Or this intelligence or something greater than us. And yeah. And so then that becomes really rocky. So they're like, oh, well, yeah, just maybe not, maybe just dissolve, right? Because it's like, again, because they're working within a paradigm of separation. And I think it's like, and I love Gabor Mate, and I feel like he's brilliant. And, I've done a lot of the trauma work and studied it because I feel like it is about healing collective trauma. But you need your spiritual base because we are spiritual beings. Like that's the whole point. We're spiritual beings. You cannot not have that in the, equation. You cannot not have that. How can you not have that? So, and I love, and so the way that Gabor Mate, for example, talks about it is, we need that love. He does talk about love. He talks about a connection with another human being, right? And we all need that. And I agree, on a physical level, we all need that. But if that's all, if we stay there, then you're completely dependent on another human being. Then you never really come into your full wholeness and your full sovereignty, right? Because as long as you're dependent on something in the material world, it's not, it's not dependable, really. The only thing you can depend on is, the truth of your being, this essence, this life that, what gives us life and what is life, right? Our soul, our essence, and that which is also the cosmic soul, the cosmic essence, the great mother, because that's always there. That's always there. And that doesn't die. And then we move out of this body, right? And then we continue our journey. And then that's a whole other conversation. But the point is that is what continues. Yeah. So that's just my 2 bits. My 2 bits. So yeah. Any other reflections? These are great because it kind of, brings me into another direction. We can weave these chords in, Yes, Leah.
Just a really quick comment on what you said. It reminded me on something that I read. I work in substance abuse, and a lot of clients in sobriety are told to follow the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, which were created by men. And the first step is to admit powerlessness. And I remember reading something that step works really great for men.
Exactly.
Since substances tend to embolden them.
Right.
And tend to have them do high risk behavior and suppress emotions they don't want to feel.
Right.
And for women tend to abuse substances because they're already starting from a place of I am powerlessness.
Exactly.
I am powerless. And so yeah, it was a whole research basically saying that women are on the margins of the 12 steps, that there's no it's not intersectional. Yeah. So
I would love to see that research. I need to put it in my next book.
Yeah, it blew my mind because women in substance abuse, it's day and night talking to the girls.
Well, it's the same thing with spiritual paths. So, and here's the thing. So let's go with that because this is such a beautiful piece. It's like we are powerless, but who's powerless? It's the ego that's powerless, right? So they're witnessing, and their whole, creation of these 12 steps is from the ego, not from the divine, or not from a place of connection with your divine sense or divine self, right? So again, it's from a place of separation. It's a distorted. So it's like you got to lean back and see where's this theory coming from. And yes, that's right. It works for men because men are in that exaggerated, yang, masculine energy, distorted. And it's all about, power and, distorted power, right? That's not the power that we're talking about in our sacred, solar plexus. That's not, sacred power is different. It's power within rather than power over. Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Yes. And as you probably know that most of spiritual, traditions that are not, feminine, spiritually based, which is probably 99% of them, are it's like, oh, it's this. So here we get into tricky territory, but it's like this idea of surrender, right? We're surrendering whatsoever. But what is surrendering, right? And that's what was so tricky for me, because it's like, yes, I can surrender, but then I'd go into all the unworthiness, because it's like we're only surrendering the part of us that feels like, it's like that egoic, inflated ego, right? Because it's not even your ego. Your ego is actually your individual self. It's not a bad thing, but it's that idea of, let's see if I can word this properly. We're surrendering the part of us that is in separation from our divine self, right? That's really what we're surrendering. But in these, they don't make that distinction because they're all in that place. So they're, just, powerlessness and being into the surrender thing is big. And there, the feminine is a large part about surrender, but it's a different kind of surrender. It's a surrender into this ocean of your being, right? There's an acknowledgement that there is this divine essence within you. It's not surrendering to something outside of you. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, we can talk forever on these. Yeah. All right. So let me read. I'm going to read the Medicine Woman, and I'm going to leave you all with that. So it'll be like a little meditation. Oh, just go off. Sometimes this camera goes off. Okay. So let's just take a deep breath and close our eyes. And I'll do a little bit of the drumming so we can just feel this. I want us to set the intention to really, activate this aspect of our being. So let yourself kind of, like, all those words, just kind of let them flow out of you, and just connecting with your breath. Letting yourself breathe. I'm just going to burn a little bit of mugwort, which is good for a feminine great mother and all of our ancient ancestor mother line, which were all medicine women, by the way. A little mugwort to clear our space and to invite the our ancient mother line that are here as our guides, the ones that are fully healed and in the light, and have no agenda for us other than just supporting our light, supporting our being, and supporting our connection to the deeper truth, to the love, and to the feminine great mother, goddess, source. And so I offer some of the mugwort and some of the smoke. All right. Medicine woman, you are the healer. The medicine woman, she is the one that carries the true medicine for our aching hearts of this world. She is the physician of the soul, able to access the healing within. Her medicine is one of surrender and trust, knowing that love is the ultimate reality and that it is always available if we are willing. She knows that her medicine is the divine realm in all of us, capable of awakening, reclaiming, and healing on all levels. The medicine woman of today uses her presence to heal herself, her community, and humanity, helping them reclaim the spiritual reality within them, which is the one true medicine. She is aware that in her essence, she carries the universal qualities that heal all the states of separation that lead to pain and suffering. She is able to tune in and allow the healing of our heart and the hearts of others as she surrenders to the inner healer realm that is directly anchored in Source. Her medicine is one of consciousness, and she can access these levels of consciousness through breath, sound, invocation, and intention. In the world, the medicine woman has access to the wisdom medicine of the universe and guides others, women and men, to fully embody their own personal sacred medicine. She recognizes that we all come with varying spiritual gifts ready to be manifested here in the world, and helping others manifest their fullest potential is part of her medicine. The medicine woman knows that we are the healers. We carry the medicine in our being, and it is our responsibility to discover and master our true nature of light presence in order to heal ourselves, our planet, and manifest that reality physically. She is the keeper of the true medicine and knows that we all carry the medicine within. Herein lies the healer. You are the healer. So just take some deep breaths and play a little bit of a medicine song to help you, support you in embodying, awakening this reality within you. So just breathing and just being with the silence for a minute. And just asking the medicine woman within you. She has a message for you today. And just listening for that. And then maybe letting yourself, if something is coming through, if you want to take a minute to write it down, to make a note. You can always journal with your medicine woman later. And then when you're ready, we can come back into the group, and I'm going to end the recording now and give thanks for those that are going to be watching this at another time. Thank you, many blessings, and we will continue tomorrow morning.